Hello, today is March 24th, 2024. I'm here with several WWHA members, Wild West Histories Association. Pam and Roy and us have been fortunate enough today to finally, for me, after 10 years of wanting to be here, the original site of the manufacturing blacksmith shop of Dr. Ernst Kapp in Sisterdale, Texas, which is about 14 miles northeast of Boerne, Texas. And you can look it up on the map. But this is now on private land, and it's very difficult to get here. So that's one reason we're making this video today. Thanks to Pam, you're going to get to see the site in case you are never able to visit this place, which I haven't been for 10 years. I've been wanting to. So right over here, Pam, you see the original blacksmith shop where the famous Sisterdale Confederate revolver was made in 1861 or 62 in preparation for the Civil War. Now, I don't know if our listeners are very educated on Civil War armories or not, but let's just go over some of the facts. Of course, when the Civil War broke out in 61, for most states, different states seceded at different times. Texas seceded in February of 61. So at that time, the South realized they didn't have the armories to produce guns, so they obviously most of the big armories were up north for the Union Army, so the South started establishing armories all over the South, and there were about 17 of them throughout the states of Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama. There were about 5 in Texas, some of which were not very successful, this being one of them. This is the rarest one, actually, because they only made 6 revolvers, and then they realized that it was not feasible, and besides, the 5 or 6 men that were making them were conscripted and drafted and had to go off to the Civil War. So this is the Dr. Ernst Kapp, K-A-P-P, farmstead, and he came here in about 1850. He bought this place. It's between the 2 branches of the Sister Creek, close to the Pinta Trail, which Jack Hayes made famous in his fight with the Comanches. So this is a very rare sight for you to see this original blacksmith shop where they hammered out those guns, and they only made 6, and then they realized it was futile and gave up. And besides, the men got drafted anyway, so they gave it up, and there's only one surviving example of the Sisterdale revolver. And we're here at a historic conference jointly sponsored by the Wild West Histories Association. And the Sisterdale revolver. Well, the most unique thing about the Sisterdale revolver is it's the only one known. Now, they supposedly made about 5 or 6, but the one back there on the display table, be sure you walk back there and take a look at it, because I don't get it out of the vault very often. It's fairly valuable, so I don't take it out too often, so this is your opportunity to see it. So I'll give you just a physical description of the gun so that you can appreciate it, and then we'll get into it later. But It's a 6-shot percussion revolver, just like Frank showed you a while ago. You know, the percussion system. You've probably heard them described as cap and ball revolvers, muzzle loaders. It means the end of the barrel, you know, is the muzzle. So you've got to load the gun through the muzzle, not the back, like you do on modern cartridge guns. That's a basic thing, too. Remember, the ones that Frank was showing you were mostly all muzzle loaders. Okay, so you got to have that rammer on the end of the barrel, and it takes 3 components. You got to put the powder in there, usually a wad, then you got to put the ball, and then you have to put percussion caps on the back of the cylinder, the breech. The other end of the barrel is called the breech, and then explodes the cap and makes the ball go out the barrel. So kind of get that in your mind. And this Sisterdale revolver is the percussion type ignition. Firearms are classified by the forms of ignition. There are a few things about the gun that are really fascinating. If you study it very closely, for example, you can see a serious wear pattern on the inside of the barrel. Now, I mean, it's the outside of the barrel, but it's the close inside of a right-handed man. So that's how we can tell things that most people don't know. If you look at that, the barrel is really worn where he kept jamming it into his holster, you know, the whole time. So you get little subtle clues like that from guns that you don't get if you just read about them. You got to examine them. So we know that this gun was probably used by a right-handed guy. In fact, we even really, I think, know who got the gun. And this was the only gun made in Sisterdale, Texas. So it's the rarest Confederate Civil War revolver there is, because there's only one known. Now, there are rumors that a piece of another one was found on the Gettysburg battlefield, but I've never been able to track it down. So maybe there's a part of another one somewhere, but it's never come to light. So this gun is really unique, being the only one. The South didn't have any armories, really. All the gun-making armories were up north, if you think about it. So the Union had Colt, Winchester, you know, all of them started up there. Eli Whitney, Marlin, all of them started up there, and they used water power. Dr. Cap, Ernst Cap, and Alfred Cap took 5 or 6 revolvers that they had made to the ordnance officer in San Antonio, according to various sources, and they obtained a contract to produce Civil War revolvers. Okay, so they go back to the farm, and now they're going to make Civil War revolvers. Well, they were making them in their blacksmith shop, just by hand. I mean, it was primitive, with Alfred Cap's direction. So the revolver was made in the blacksmith shop on the Cap farm behind the main house. And he had about 4 or 5 workers with him. Okay, that's a picture taken in 1951 of the Cap blacksmith shop where the gun was made. The revolver itself is sort of a amalgamation of several features, including Colt, Smith & Wesson, Remington. Remember, it's percussion. The locking bolt is on top of the cylinder instead of the bottom like a Colt. It has a grip like a Rogers & Spencer, and it has an outside hand that revolves the cylinder on the external side of the revolver. And a Colt, it's internal. So it's kind of an amalgamation of about 3 or 4 different types of revolvers. It's single action with a 6-shot cylinder, 7.5-inch barrel. And it weighs almost the same as a Walker revolver. Have you ever held a Walker revolver?
you should take advantage of the one Frank brought here and just try to hold that out there with one hand. You can hardly hold it steady. I don't know how they did it. Of course, they let the horses carry them in the Mexican War, you know. They were too heavy. They didn't wear them on their hips. They were almost 4 pounds. And you think that's not too much until you've carried it for 12 hours or 24 hours a day. So they just put them in these big pommel holsters on the horse and let the horse carry them. They weren't about to carry these big things. Let's talk about Provenance a minute. The important thing on the Sisterdale revolver is where it came from. Now, don't confuse Provenance with Providence, okay? Provenance is big man upstairs. Through him, this survived. Provenance, different word, Provenance, is the history of ownership. Be sure you get that straight, because I see it messed up in the literature all the time. People think it's the same word. No, Provenance, the history of ownership. Remember that. And there have only been 6 owners since it was made. I'm the 6th owner of the revolver. So we know every owner basically since Alfred Camp made that thing in that blacksmith shop in 1862, probably. We're pretty sure it was 62. Now, here's something fascinating. The records say that in 1862, Alfred was called to his unit down in southeast Texas. He and the Corres had to report to a service down there, and they gave their commanding officer, Colonel Wood, a revolver. Well, I think they probably gave him this revolver, or they gave him a Cap revolver. It didn't say, but why would they give him a Colt? You know, they probably gave him the one they made. So we think that Colonel Wood actually had this revolver and carried it through the Civil War, and luckily brought it back. And then it ended up back in the hands of the Correth family. Joe Correth gave it to his son, Rudolph Correth. Rudolph gave it to another Correth, and that Correth donated to the Sophienberg Museum in New Braunfels, where it stayed for the next 50 years. So it was in the museum for 50 years until a guy, gun collector, and the Texas gun collector, his name, Wheeler Creeling.
Creel.
I never can get it. Creel? Wheeler Creel got it out of the museum and sold it to Charlie Schreiner. And then Charlie sold it to this big Confederate collector in Virginia, and I tried to buy it for 20, 30 years, never could get it, and finally the poor guy died, and I got it when they auctioned it off, brought it back to Texas, and I intend for it to stay right